Dr. Kethver pressed his six-clawed fingers against the cool surface of the datapad. The numbers glowed softly in the dim light of the archives. 237 extinct civilizations. Each one had been mighty once. Each one had ruled systems across the galaxy. Each one had simply vanished. The Zethrian scientist had spent his entire life studying dead empires. His people lived for 400 years, and he had used every one of those years to understand why great civilizations fell. The answers always disturbed him, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the pattern seemed clearer than ever before. He walked between the tall shelves that held the records of lost worlds. The archive stretched for miles beneath the surface of Confederation Prime, the capital world of the most powerful alliance in the galaxy. Every species that had ever reached the stars was recorded here. The living and the dead shared space on these endless shelves. Kethver stopped at a section marked with symbols that most beings could not read. These were the oldest records. The civilizations that had died before his own people had learned to build ships that could cross between stars. He pulled out a crystal that contained the history of the Vorthek Empire. The Vorthek had ruled 300 systems for over 2,000 years. They had been warriors without equal. Their ships could destroy planets. Their armies had never known defeat. Then they found a small world on the edge of the galaxy. The world held a primitive species that had barely learned to use fire. The Vorthek demanded that these primitives bow down and serve the Empire. The primitives refused. Within 50 years, the Vorthek Empire was gone, not defeated in battle, not conquered by another power, simply gone as if they had never existed at all. Kethver placed the crystal back on its shelf and picked up another. This one told the story of the Megalith Consortium. They had been traders and builders who controlled the flow of goods across half the galaxy. They had created wonders that still amaze scientists today. Their floating cities could house billions of beings. The megalith found the same primitive world that had destroyed the Vorthek. By then, the primitives had learned to make simple tools and basic weapons. The megalith tried to be clever. They did not demand worship. They offered a trade agreement that would have made the primitives slaves in all but name. The primitives said no. 43 years later, the last megalith city fell silent. Their ships drifted empty through space. Their great works crumbled without hands to maintain them. One by one, Kethver read through the records. The pattern never changed. Great empires would grow and spread across the stars. They would become proud and powerful, and they would find that one small world. They would make demands. The primitives would refuse, and the empires would die. The latest entry in his collection was only 300 years old. The Stellar Dominion had been the strongest power in the galaxy before the current Confederation took its place. They had possessed weapons that could tear holes in space itself. Their scientists could extend life for thousands of years. Their fleets numbered in the millions. They too had found the primitive world. By this time, the species there had learned to fly in simple machines and had begun to use electricity. The Dominion saw potential in these creatures. They offered membership in their empire, but as junior partners who would serve their betters for the next 1,000 years, the primitives looked at the offer and said, no. The Stellar Dominion lasted 218 years after that refusal. Not all at once. The decline was slow but steady. Their fleets began to fail in battle against enemies they had easily defeated before. Their colonies rebelled. Their allies turned against them. Disease struck their core worlds. Natural disasters destroyed their greatest achievements within those 2 centuries. The mightiest empire in galactic history became a scattered collection of frightened survivors who barely remembered their former glory. Kethver had spent decades trying to understand how one primitive world could destroy civilization after civilization. The world was small and unremarkable. It had one moon and orbited an ordinary yellow star. Its people had no special powers. They could not read minds or see the future. They had no natural weapons like claws or venom. Yet every empire that had tried to conquer them had died. The old scientist returned to his desk and activated his communication device. He had been putting off this call for months, but the time had come. The screen flickered to life, showing the face of Admiral Quextan, the military commander of the Confederation fleet. "Dr. Kethver," the admiral said, his 4 eyes blinking. "In surprise, I was not expecting to hear from you. Is there new information about the archaeological survey of the Helix Nebula?" "No, Admiral," Kethver replied, his voice heavy with worry. "I am calling about the new species that was detected entering our space 3 days ago, the ones from the Sol system." Admiral Quextan's mandibles clicked in what his species used as a laugh. "The humans? They seem harmless enough." "Our first contact teams report that they are eager to trade and learn about our technology. Their ships are primitive by our standards and their population is small. Why would you be concerned about them?" Kethver felt his skin change color, a sign of deep stress among his people. "Admiral, I have been studying the location of their home system. Sol has appeared in my records before, many times." "What do you mean?" "Every empire in my collection sent expeditions to the Sol system shortly before they fell. The Vorthak found it first over 3,000 years ago. The Megalith Consortium made contact 2,000 years ago. The Stellar Dominion established trade relations 300 years ago. All of them tried to make the humans submit to their rule." "The admirals?" 4 eyes narrowed. "And you believe this small species somehow destroyed these great powers?" "I do not know how," Kethver admitted. "But the pattern is too clear to ignore. Every single empire that has ever made contact with humanity has fallen within decades of that first meeting. Not one has survived." Admiral Quextan was quiet for a long moment. "Dr. Kethver, with respect, you are seeing patterns where none exist. The Vorthak fell because of internal civil wars. The Megalith Consortium collapsed due to economic problems. The Stellar Dominion was weakened by plague and natural disasters. These things happen to all civilizations eventually. But why did they all happen after contact with humanity?" "Coincidence," the admiral said firmly. "The humans we have met are peaceful and curious. They ask many questions about our history and technology, but that is natural for a young species entering galactic society. They have made no threats or demands. They seem genuinely interested in friendship and trade." Kethver leaned forward, his claws clicking against his desk. "Admiral, that is exactly what every previous civilization said about humanity at first contact. The humans always seem peaceful. They always seem curious. They always ask questions about history and technology. And then, within a few decades, their contacts begin to die." "You are being paranoid, old friend," Admiral Quextan said, but his voice held less certainty than before. "Perhaps you have spent too much time studying dead civilizations. It may be affecting your judgment." "Perhaps," Kethver agreed. "But I request permission to access the detailed reports from our contact teams. I want to know exactly what questions the humans are asking and what information they are seeking." The admiral considered this. "Very well, I will grant you access to the first contact files. But I do not want you causing panic over ancient history and wild theories. The Confederation Council is excited about the possibilities that humanity represents. They see potential for new trade routes and technological exchange. Of course, Admiral, I will be discreet." The communication ended, and Kethver sat alone in the vast archive. Around him, the records of dead civilizations seemed to whisper warnings that no one would hear. He had spent his life studying extinction, and now he feared he was watching it happen again, but this time was different. This time, his own people might be the ones to join the endless shelves of the forgotten. Dead, he activated his workstation and began to access the first contact reports. The humans had asked about Confederation military strength and defensive capabilities. They had requested detailed star charts showing the location of major colonies and trade routes. They had shown particular interest in learning about past conflicts and how they had been resolved. The humans claimed this was all simple curiosity about their new neighbors. Their representatives were polite and friendly. They offered gifts of art and music from their homeworld. They seemed genuinely grateful for the warm welcome they had received, Kethver had read similar reports in the archives. The Vorthak had described human curiosity about military matters. The megalith had noted human interest in trade routes and economic systems. The Stellar Dominion had recorded human questions about technology and politics. Every extinct empire had made the same observation. The humans were so very interested in learning everything about their new friends. As Kethver read through the current reports, he began to understand something that filled him with cold dread. The humans were not just asking random questions. They were conducting a systematic study of Confederation society, military capabilities, economic systems, political structures, cultural weaknesses. It looked exactly like the intelligence gathering that any wise species would do before launching a war, but the humans showed no signs of hostility. They had come in peace, with open hands and friendly smiles, just as they had with every other empire they had encountered, just as they had before those empires had simply ceased to exist. Kethver sat back in his chair and stared at the data flowing across his screen. 237 extinct civilizations. All of them had been more powerful than humanity when first contact was made. All of them had underestimated the small species from the Sol system. Now it was the Confederation's turn to make that same mistake. He began to compose a detailed report for the Council, knowing that they would probably ignore his warnings just as every other government had ignored the signs before them. But he had to try. Someone had to speak for the dead civilizations that filled his archives. Someone had to warn the living that humanity had returned to the galaxy, and that meant someone else was about to die. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood at the window of the diplomatic station, watching the stars of the Confederation capital system. She had been in space for 6 months now, leading humanity's first official mission to the galactic community. The journey from Earth had taken 2 years, but it felt like she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. Behind her, the conference room buzzed with activity. Her team of diplomats, scientists, and military advisors worked around the clock to process the flood of information coming from their new galactic neighbors. Every day brought new discoveries about alien cultures, technologies, and ways of thinking that humans had never imagined. Ambassador, called Dr. Marcus Webb, her chief science advisor, the Confederation Council has approved our request to establish permanent trade offices on 12 worlds. They're also offering us access to their educational networks. Sarah turned from the window and smiled. Excellent. What about the military cooperation agreements? Captain James Rodriguez, her military liaison, looked up from his datapad. They're being cautious about that, but Admiral Quextan seems interested in joint training exercises. Nothing major yet, but it's a start. The past months had been a careful dance of diplomacy. The Confederation included over 200 species, each with their own customs and concerns. Humans had to prove they could be trusted members of galactic society. Most species had welcomed them warmly, but some remained suspicious of any newcomer. Sarah's communication device chimed. Ambassador, you have an incoming message from Counselor Yethmara of the Hegemony of Sarthic. Put it through, Sarah replied, straightening her formal jacket. The holographic display activated, showing the imposing figure of a Sarthic warrior. Counselor Yethmara stood nearly 3 meters tall, with thick armor-like skin and 4 powerful arms. His species had evolved on a harsh world where only the strongest survived. They had built their empire through conquest and maintained it through military strength. Ambassador Chung, Yethmara said, his voice deep and rumbling. I trust your stay on Confederation Prime has been educational. Very much so, Counselor. Your people's military history is particularly fascinating. The Battle of the Seven Suns is studied at our war colleges. Yethmara's 4 eyes narrowed slightly. Indeed. The humans seem to have great interest in military matters for such a peaceful species. Sarah kept her expression neutral. We believe understanding history helps prevent repeating past mistakes. Conflict benefits no one. An admirable sentiment. The Sarthic replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. I contact you regarding the Kepler 442 system. My government has decided to establish new colonies there. Sarah felt a chill. Kepler 442 was where humanity had already sent 3 colony ships. Over 50,000 humans were building new lives. On the worlds there. Counselor, I believe there may be some confusion. Human settlers have been developing those worlds for the past 18 months. No confusion, Ambassador. The Kepler 442 system lies within the traditional expansion zone of the Sarthic hegemony. We claimed it long before your species learned to travel between stars. But there were no markers or stations when our ships arrived. The system appeared unclaimed under Confederation law. Yethmara's mandibles clicked in what Sarah had learned was a sign of annoyance among his people. The Sarthic do not need to place markers on what already belongs to us. These worlds were conquered by our ancestors 8 centuries ago. That your people did not know this does not change the facts. Sarah glanced at her team. Dr. Webb was already pulling up stellar records on his datapad. Captain Rodriguez was checking military protocols. Both men looked tense. Counselor, surely we can find a peaceful solution. The system has multiple habitable worlds. Perhaps we could share the space? The Sarthic do not share what belongs to them, Yethmara said. Firmly. Your colonists have 7 days to evacuate. After that, they will be removed by force. 7 days is not enough time to evacuate 50,000 people. Even if we agreed to leave, which we do not, the logistics alone would require months. That is not our concern. The humans have 7 days. The communication ended abruptly, leaving Sarah staring at the empty holographic display. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Options? Sarah asked quietly. Captain Rodriguez spoke first. Militarily. We're outnumbered at least 50 to 1. The Sarthic have battle fleets scattered throughout this sector. We have 3 colony ships and their escort vessels. Dr. Webb looked up from his research. Legally, we might have a case. Confederation law does require proper claim markers for territorial expansion, but the Sarthic predate most current laws and they have significant political influence. Sarah nodded slowly. What about diplomatic pressure? Can we get other species to mediate? Unlikely, Dr. Webb replied. Most Confederation members avoid confronting the Sarthic directly. They're too powerful and too quick to anger. So our choices are surrender or fight? Essentially, yes. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking. She had been chosen for this mission partly because of her skills as a negotiator, but also because of her background. Before becoming a diplomat, she had studied military history and strategy. She understood that sometimes peaceful solutions were not possible. Send a message to Earth, Priority 1 encryption. Tell them we need immediate consultation with the Colonial Defense Council. Ambassador, Dr. Webb said carefully, that's essentially asking for military authorization. Yes, it is. The Sarthic have the strongest military in this sector. They've fought hundreds of wars and won almost all of them. They've never been defeated in direct combat. Sarah looked at her science advisor with an expression he had never seen before. It was calm and cold and somehow frightening. Marcus, have you studied human military history? Some, but not in detail. We've fought over 14,000 wars in our recorded history. We've developed weapons and tactics that most species never imagine. We've turned warfare into a science. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward. Are you suggesting we actually fight them? I'm suggesting we give them exactly what they're asking for. Sarah's voice was steady and emotionless. The Sarthic want to fight. They think we'll run because we're new and weak. They believe their reputation will make us surrender without resistance. It might, Dr. Webb said nervously. No, it won't. Sarah turned back to the window, looking out at the stars. Because they don't understand what humans are. Over the next 3 days, messages flew between the diplomatic station and Earth. Sarah met with Confederation officials, trying to find a peaceful solution, but the Sarthic refused all compromise. They had made their demands clear. The humans would leave or be removed. Other species watched the developing crisis with interest and concern. Many had experienced Sarthic aggression before and had been forced to yield to their demands. The general expectation was that humanity would follow the same pattern. A new species could not be expected to stand against an empire that had dominated this region for centuries. Dr. Kethver watched the news reports from his archive office. He had tried to warn the council about humanity, but his concerns had been dismissed. Now he saw the pattern beginning again. The humans were being tested by a powerful empire. Soon, that empire would discover what every other civilization had learned: fighting humanity was a mistake that no one survived. On the fourth day, Sarah received her orders from Earth. The Colonial Defense Council had made their decision. Admiral Jackson Torres would arrive with the Third Fleet within 72 hours. Humanity would not abandon its colonies. Sarah called a press conference with representatives from dozens of species. The room was packed with journalists and diplomats, all eager to hear how humanity would respond to Sarthic demands. The human government has carefully considered the Sarthic position regarding the Kepler 442 system. Sarah began, her voice calm and professional. We respect the proud history of the Sarthic hegemony and acknowledge their traditional strength. In this region, many in the audience relaxed slightly. It sounded like humanity would choose the reasonable path and avoid conflict. However, Sarah continued, our colonists are not invaders or thieves. They are families who have built homes and lives on worlds that showed no signs of previous occupation. To abandon these settlements would be to abandon our people. The tension in the room increased again. Therefore, humanity rejects the Sarthic ultimatum. Our colonies will remain. We have no desire for conflict, but we will defend our people and our rights under Confederation law. A Sarthic reporter stood up, his forearms crossed in a gesture of defiance. Do the humans understand what they are choosing? The hegemony has never lost a war. Our fleets have crushed every enemy that has dared to stand against us. Sarah looked directly at the reporter, and her expression showed no fear or doubt. We understand exactly what we're choosing. The question is whether the Sarthic understand what they're choosing. What do you mean? We tried diplomacy. We offered compromise. We sought peaceful solutions. Sarah's voice grew colder with each word, but some lessons can only be taught in blood. The room erupted in shocked voices and rapid translations. No one had expected such a direct threat from the supposedly peaceful humans. Sarah continued, speaking over the noise. The Sarthic pride themselves on being warriors. They believe strength determines right. Very well. Let them send their fleets to Kepler 442. Let them discover whether 8 centuries of victories have prepared them for what humanity calls war. The press conference ended in chaos as reporters rushed to file their stories. Within hours, news of humanity's defiance spread across the galaxy. Most species were shocked that such a small and new civilization would dare challenge the mighty HFY. In his archive office, Dr. Kethver read the reports with growing dread. He had seen this before. The pattern was starting again. Soon, another great empire would discover that humanity was not like other species. Soon, the Sarthic would learn why every civilization that had tried to conquer the small blue world had simply vanished from history. On Sarthic Prime, Counselor Yathmara received the news of human defiance with satisfaction. Finally, a chance to remind the galaxy why his people were feared. The humans would provide an excellent example of what happened to those who opposed the hegemony. He ordered the first battle fleet to prepare for immediate departure. 50 dreadnoughts and their support vessels would be more than enough to deal with a few primitive colony ships. The war would be over in days. The Sarthic had no idea that they had just sealed their empire's fate. Fleet Commander Thekvar stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Infinite Victory, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace through the main viewing screen. Around him, his officers prepared for what they expected to be a simple operation. 50 of the hegemony's finest warships were traveling to the Kepler 442 system to remove some stubborn human colonists. The commander had fought in dozens of battles during his long career. He had seen entire fleets surrender at the mere sight of Sarthic vessels. The humans would likely flee as soon as his forces arrived. If they were foolish enough to fight, the battle would last minutes. "Commander," his communications officer called out. "We are receiving final intelligence reports from our scouts in the system. Display them." The tactical screen showed the Kepler 442 system in detail. 3 worlds held human colonies, each with populations in the tens of thousands. The humans had built cities, farms, and basic industrial facilities. It was exactly what Thekvar expected from a young species just beginning to spread among the stars. "Enemy military forces?" he asked. "Minimal, sir. 3 colony ships converted for light defense duties. Several cargo vessels. No major warships?" "Detected." Thekvar clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. The humans had not even bothered to send proper military support to their colonies. This would be easier than expected. What about planetary defenses? Basic shield generators around the major cities. Some surfaced or orbit weapons, but nothing that could threaten our vessels. The colonies appeared designed for protection against pirates, not military fleets. Estimated time for complete pacification? The tactical officer studied his displays. "Assuming minimal resistance, sir, no more than 6 hours to secure all 3 worlds." Thekvar nodded. 6 hours was longer than he had hoped, but acceptable. The humans would learn a valuable lesson about challenging the hegemony, and the rest of the galaxy would remember why the Sarthic were feared. Prepare for system entry. All ships to battle formation. The Sarthic fleet dropped out of hyperspace. At the edge of the Kepler 442 system, like a swarm of metal predators. Each dreadnought was over 2 kilometers long, armed with weapons that could crack planets and shields that had never been breached. The sight of them had ended wars before they began. Thekvar expected immediate communication from the human colonies. Usually, civilized species would request negotiations or announce their surrender when faced with such overwhelming force. Instead, his communication screens remained silent. "Sir," the sensor operator said, his voice confused. "I'm not detecting the human ships." "What do you mean?" "The 3 colony vessels our scouts reported. They're not showing up on scans?" Thekvar frowned. "Equipment malfunction?" "No, sir, all systems are functioning normally. The colonies are still there, but the ships have vanished." "Ships do not simply vanish. Expand the search pattern." For 20 minutes, the Sarthic fleet scanned the system while moving toward the inhabited worlds. They found no trace of human military vessels. Either the humans had fled or they were hiding somewhere in the vast emptiness of space. "Commander," the communications officer announced, "we are receiving a transmission from the human colonies." "Finally, put it through." The main screen showed a woman in military uniform standing in what appeared to be a command center. She looked calm and professional, showing no fear of the massive fleet approaching her worlds. "I am Admiral Jackson Torres of the Human Colonial Defense Force," she said. "You are entering sovereign human territory without permission. State your intentions." Thekvar almost laughed. The human spoke as if she had any power to make demands. "I am Fleet Commander Thekvar of the Sarthic hegemony. You have been ordered to evacuate these worlds. Your time is up." "Our answer hasn't changed, Commander." "These colonies stay. Then you have chosen death. Surrender now and your people will be relocated safely. Continue this foolishness and they will be removed by force." Admiral Torres smiled, and something in that expression made Thekvar feel uneasy. "Commander, are you familiar with human military doctrine?" "I do not waste time studying the tactics of primitives." "That's unfortunate." "Our primary rule is simple. The enemy's willingness to die for their cause must never exceed your willingness to kill for yours." The Admiral's smile grew colder. "The question is, Commander, how many of your people are you willing to sacrifice for empty worlds?" The transmission ended, leaving Thekvar staring at a blank screen. The human's words puzzled him. What did she mean about sacrifice? The Sarthic held every advantage. They had more ships, better weapons, and centuries of military experience. Oh, ships advanced to bombardment range. Prepare to target military installations. The fleet moved deeper into the system, their sensors constantly sweeping for hidden threats. The 3 human colonies grew larger on their screens, but still no enemy ships appeared. Either the humans were cowards who had fled, or they were planning something desperate. "Sir," the sensor operator called out urgently. "Contact?" "Multiple." "Contacts? Where?" "Everywhere." Vekvar looked at the tactical display and felt his blood turn cold. Ships were appearing all around his fleet. Not just in front of them, but behind, above, below, and to both sides. They emerged from asteroid fields where they had been hiding. They rose from the upper atmospheres of gas giants where sensors could not penetrate. They powered up from the cold dark between planets where they had been drifting silently. "How many?" Vekvar demanded. "Counting now, sir?" "At least 200 vessels." "No, 300. The numbers keep climbing." "That's impossible. Intelligence reported only 3 ships." "Sir, these aren't the same class of vessels our scouts." "Detected. These are warships, purpose-built for combat." Vekvar studied the enemy formations with growing alarm. The human ships were smaller than Sarthic dreadnoughts, but they moved with precision and coordination that spoke of extensive training. More disturbing, they had positioned themselves perfectly to attack from multiple directions at once. "Communications. Open a channel to Admiral Torres." The human admiral appeared on screen again, but now she was clearly aboard a warship. Behind her, Vekvar could see crew members working at battle stations. "Impressed, Commander?" she asked. "Where did these ships come from?" "Our intelligence showed no major human military presence." "Your intelligence was exactly what we wanted it to see. The 3 vessels your scouts detected were decoys. Our real fleet has been in this system for weeks, waiting for you." "Impossible." "Our sensors would have detected them. Sarthic sensors are designed to find Sarthic ships. You look for large vessels with active power signatures? We built our ships differently. Smaller, quieter, harder to detect. We studied your technology and designed countermeasures." Vekvar felt the first stirrings of genuine concern. "You have more ships than we expected, but you are still outnumbered. Surrender now and avoid unnecessary bloodshed." Admiral Torres laughed, and the sound was not pleasant. "Commander, you still don't understand. This isn't a battle, it's a demonstration." "Demonstration of what?" "Of why every empire that has ever tried to conquer humanity has ceased to exist." Before Vekvar could respond, the human ships opened fire. The attack was unlike anything in Sarthic military experience. Instead of the massive energy beams that most civilizations used in space combat, the humans launched small projectiles that moved at incredible speed. Vekvar's tactical officer identified them as nuclear weapons, but that was impossible. No civilized species had used nuclear weapons in space for thousands of years. They were considered primitive and barbaric. The humans used hundreds of them. The nuclear missiles struck Sarthic shields with devastating effect. Each explosion sent waves of radiation and electromagnetic energy that disrupted electronics and overwhelmed defensive systems. Ships that had survived direct hits from planet killing. Weapons found their shields failing under sustained nuclear bombardment. "Return fire," Vekvar ordered. The Sarthic fleet responded with their traditional tactics. Massive energy beams lanced out toward human vessels, each shot powerful enough to destroy a city. But the human ships moved in ways that violated every principle of space combat. They used the gravity of planets and moons to change direction suddenly. They hid behind asteroids and space debris. When cornered, they did the unthinkable. They rammed their ships directly into Sarthic dreadnoughts. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking, "the destroyer Crimson Blade is gone. A human ship loaded with nuclear weapons struck it amidships. Both vessels destroyed." "They're committing suicide to damage our ships?" "It appears so, sir." Vekvar watched in horror as more human vessels sacrificed themselves to cripple Sarthic warships. Each kamikaze attack was precisely calculated to cause maximum damage. The humans didn't just throw their lives away randomly. They studied each target, identified weak points, and struck with surgical precision. "Commander," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving transmissions from the human colonies. What are they saying?" "They're singing, sir." Vekvar listened to the strange harmonies coming from the planets below. Human voices joined together in songs he didn't recognize. The music was beautiful and haunting, but it made no sense. Why would civilians sing during a battle? "Admiral Torres," he called out on the open channel, "why are your people singing?" The human admiral appeared on screen again. Her ship showed damage from the fighting, but her expression remained calm. "They're singing our war songs, Commander. Every human culture has them. Songs that remind us what we're fighting for and why dying for it is worthwhile. You're all insane." "No, Commander, we're just human. This is what we do." The battle raged for 3 hours. The Sarthic fleet, which had expected to finish the operation in 6 hours, found themselves trapped in a nightmare of unconventional tactics and fanatical resistance. Human ships attacked from impossible angles. They used weapons that civilized species had abandoned. They turned their own vessels into guided missiles when conventional attacks failed. Most disturbing of all, they never asked for mercy. Even when their ships were crippled and their crews dying, the humans fought until their vessels exploded or lost all power. They took no prisoners and seemed to expect none to be taken. "Sir," the damage control officer reported, "we've lost 12 dreadnoughts and over 30 support vessels. Enemy losses are approximately 200 ships, but they keep fighting." Vekvar realized with growing horror that the humans were winning. Not through superior technology or numbers, but through sheer willingness to die for their cause. They fought like wild animals defending their young, except they did it with nuclear weapons and military precision. "All ships, prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace. We're withdrawing." "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from Admiral Torres." The human admiral appeared one final time. Her ship was heavily damaged and fires burned in the background behind her, but she was smiling. "Leaving so soon, Commander?" "I thought the mighty Sarthic never retreated from battle." "This battle is over," Vekvar said, trying to maintain some dignity, "but this war has just begun. The hegemony will return with the full might of our empire." "I'm counting on it," Admiral Torres replied. "We'll be waiting." As the surviving Sarthic ships fled into hyperspace, Admiral Torres turned to her officers. The bridge of her flagship was scarred by battle damage, and many of her crew bore injuries from the fighting. "Status report," she ordered. "We lost 60% of our ships, Admiral, but the enemy lost 40% of theirs and retreated. Acceptable losses. Signal the colonies to begin Phase 2 of the defense plan." "Phase 2, Admiral?" Admiral Torres looked out at the stars where the Sarthic fleet had vanished. "Now we hunt them." They came here expecting easy prey. Instead, they found predators. Time to show them what human warfare really looks like. In the depths of space, automated beacons began activating throughout Sarthic territory. Human special forces teams that had been infiltrating enemy systems for months received their orders. The real war was about to begin, and the Sarthic had no idea what was coming for them. Dr. Kethver had not slept in 3 days. He sat surrounded by stacks of data crystals and holographic displays showing the remains of the Sarthic First Battle Fleet. The reports from Kepler 442 painted a picture that both fascinated and terrified him. The humans had not just defeated a superior force. They had done it using methods that seemed impossible: nuclear weapons in space combat, suicide attacks, ships that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. The Sarthic survivors spoke of tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Their reports sounded like the ravings of beings who had seen too much horror, but Kethver believed every word. He pulled up another crystal from his collection, one containing the military records of the Vorthic Empire. 3,000 years ago, they had encountered similar tactics from the same small blue world. The Vorthak had called them impossible fighting methods and barbaric strategies. Their commanders had reported facing enemies who fought like wild animals but with advanced Technology. The pattern was exactly the same. Kethver activated his communication device and sent a priority message to the Confederation Council. Within an hour, he received permission to present his findings to an emergency session. As he prepared his data, news reports continued to flow in from across Sarthic space. The humans had not stopped with their victory at Kepler 442 over the past week. Sarthic military bases throughout their territory had come under attack. The strikes were surgical and devastating. Supply depots exploded. Communication centers went dark. Entire fleets found themselves cut off from command and control. What puzzled military analysts was how the humans were doing it. The attacks came from inside Sarthic space, far from any known human territory. It was as if human forces had been hiding throughout the Empire for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Confederation Council chamber was packed when Kethver arrived. Representatives from dozens of species had come to hear his analysis of the human military capabilities. Many looked nervous. The destruction of a major Sarthic fleet had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Admiral Quextan introduced him to the assembly. Dr. Kethver has spent his career studying extinct civilizations. He believes the current conflict follows a pattern seen throughout galactic history. Kethver stood at the central podium, his data crystals arranged before him. Honorable delegates, what I'm about to show you will be difficult to accept, but the evidence is overwhelming. He activated the main display, showing a timeline spanning 3 millennia. Dozens of civilizations appeared and disappeared in regular cycles. Every major empire in galactic history has encountered humanity at some point. Without exception, those empires have fallen within decades of first contact. A representative from the Altarian Republic stood up. Dr. Kethver, correlation is not causation. Many factors contribute to the fall of civilizations. Indeed, Kethver agreed. But examine the specific details. The display zoomed in on individual empire records. The Vorthic Empire lasted 2,000 years until they met humanity, then they fell in 50 years. The Megalith Consortium dominated trade for 15 centuries. After contact with humans, they collapsed in 43 years. He brought up military records from the extinct empires. Look at the tactical reports. Every empire describes the same fighting methods. Nuclear weapons, suicide attacks, stealth technology, psychological warfare. The humans have been using these tactics for thousands of years. Counselor Yethmara of the Sarthic delegation spoke from his seat. You speak as if humanity is some kind of galactic plague. They are one small species on the rim of civilized space. Counselor, with respect, your own fleet commanders might disagree. What did Fleet Commander Thekvar report about the battle at Kepler 442? Yethmara's forearms crossed in obvious discomfort. He spoke of unconventional tactics, nothing more. Did he mention how many human ships were already in the system before your fleet arrived? Did he explain how they had hidden an entire battle group from your sensors for weeks? The chamber fell silent. The details of the Kepler 442 battle had been classified, but rumors had spread throughout the military community. Kethver continued his presentation. I have spent the past week studying human history through the cultural exchanges we have had. With them, what I discovered explains everything. The display changed to show Earth's surface. Images of ancient battlefields, weapons development, and military academies filled the screen. Humans have fought over 14,000 wars in their recorded history. They have turned warfare into a science. They study it like we study physics or mathematics. A new image appeared showing human military academies. They have institutions dedicated to nothing but the study of conflict. They analyze every battle, every tactic, every strategy. They learn from their enemies and adapt their methods accordingly. But what makes them truly dangerous, Kethver said, his voice growing, quiet, is how they think about war itself. He displayed translated excerpts from human military texts. Most species view warfare as a necessary evil, something to be endured when diplomacy fails. Humans see it differently. They treat war as a natural state, Peace is temporary. Conflict is eternal. The chamber erupted in shocked voices and rapid translations. The idea that any species could view warfare as natural was difficult for most civilized beings to accept. Kethver waited for quiet before continuing. This explains their behavior during first contact. They seem peaceful and curious because they are gathering intelligence. Every question they ask, every cultural exchange they participate in, every trade agreement they negotiate gives them information about potential enemies. Admiral Queckstan leaned forward in his seat. Are you saying their entire diplomatic mission was a military operation? I'm saying that for humans, there is no difference between diplomacy and warfare. They are both tools used to achieve the same goal, survival and expansion. Kethver brought up the most disturbing data he had found. Human military doctrine includes something they call total war. This means they do not distinguish between military and civilian targets. They attack infrastructure, economics, communications, food production, and anything else that supports their enemy's ability to fight. That's barbaric, someone called out from the audience. Perhaps, but it is also highly effective. When humans go to war, they do not seek to defeat enemy armies. They seek to destroy enemy civilizations completely. The display showed the current situation in Sarthic space. Red markers indicated attacked installations throughout their territory. The strikes on Sarthic bases are not random raids. They are systematic destruction of the Empire's ability to wage war. Humans are not trying to win battles. They are trying to eliminate the Sarthic as a threat. Counselor Yethmara stood up, his forearms trembling with rage. You accuse humanity of genocide? I accuse them of being exactly what they have always been, Kethver replied calmly. Apex predators who evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them, including their own species. He displayed information about Earth's environment and history. Their homeworld is a death trap. Massive predators, deadly diseases, natural disasters, climate changes that destroyed entire civilizations. Most species would have gone extinct on such a world. Humans thrived. They did not just survive their environment, they conquered it. They drove most large predators to extinction. They reshaped continents. They changed the climate itself. Then, when they ran out of external enemies, they turned on each other. New images showed human conflicts throughout history. For thousands of years, they fought wars of extermination against their own kind. Different tribes, nations, ideologies, religions. They perfected the art of destroying civilizations long before they reached the stars. The chamber was completely silent now. The implications of what Kethver was saying began to sink in. Humanity was not just another species learning to be part of galactic civilization. They were something far more dangerous. The pattern is clear, Kethver continued. Humans enter galactic society peacefully. They learn everything they can about existing powers. Then they wait for someone to challenge them. When that challenge comes, they respond with total warfare designed to completely eliminate the threat. But why? Admiral Queckstan asked. What do they gain from destroying entire civilizations? Security, Kethver answered simply. Humans believe that any species capable of threatening them will eventually do so. Therefore, potential threats must be eliminated before they become actual threats. He brought up the final piece of evidence. Communications intercepts from human diplomatic channels. During their negotiations with us, humans have requested detailed information about military capabilities, territorial boundaries, alliance structures, and resource distribution. They are not planning to join galactic civilization. They are planning to control it. Counselor Yethmara's voice was barely controlled. You suggest that this small species intends to conquer the entire galaxy? I suggest that they already are. The Sarthic challenge was not an obstacle to human expansion. It was an opportunity. By defeating your empire, humans will demonstrate their power to every other species. Some will submit voluntarily. Others will resist and be destroyed. Kethver paused, looking around the chamber at the frightened faces of representatives from dozens of species. The question is not whether humanity will come for us. The question is when. What do you recommend? Admiral Quextan asked quietly. Based on 3,000 years of galactic history? Nothing. Every empire that has tried to stop humanity has fallen. Military resistance only teaches them how to fight us more effectively. Economic pressure gives them reason to develop alternatives. Diplomatic isolation pushes them toward conflict. So we do nothing, we survive, we adapt. We hope that when humanity finishes establishing their galactic dominance, they will have some use for the rest of us. The session ended in chaos as representatives rushed to contact their home governments. Within hours, emergency sessions were being held on dozens of worlds. Some species began preparing for war. Others started drafting surrender documents. Dr. Kethver returned to his archives, knowing that soon he would need to add another entry to his collection. Not for humanity, which would survive and thrive as it always had, but for the Confederation itself, which had just realized it was facing an enemy it could not defeat. In space around Sarthic Prime, human fleets gathered like predators closing in on wounded prey. The hegemony that had ruled this sector for 8 centuries was about to learn what every extinct empire had learned before them. Humanity had not come to join galactic civilization. They had come to replace it, and the galaxy was finally beginning to understand what that meant. The Sarthic homeworld burned from orbit. The great cities that had stood for 1,000 years were now columns of smoke rising into the poisoned sky. The proud towers where Sarthic warriors had planned the conquest of dozens of worlds were broken rubble. The shipyards that had built the mightiest fleets in the galaxy were twisted. Metal graveyards. It had taken the humans exactly 11 months to destroy an empire that had lasted 8 centuries. Admiral Jackson Torres stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the final Sarthic military installation surrender. The resistance had ended 3 days ago when the last hegemony fleet was trapped and destroyed in the Cathara system. Now there was nothing left but the formal ceremony of defeat. Admiral, her communications officer announced, Counselor Yethmara is requesting permission to come aboard. Granted. Full military honors. Some of her officers looked surprised, but Torres had learned long ago that how you treated a defeated enemy determined how the galaxy would remember your victory. The Sarthic had fought bravely and followed their own code of honor. They deserved respect in defeat. Counselor Yethmara entered the flagship's conference room flanked by 2 human guards. The once proud Sarthic leader looked older and smaller than he had during their first meeting. His forearms hung at his sides and his warrior's armor was scarred by battle. Admiral Torres, he said formally, I come to surrender the remaining forces of the Sarthic hegemony. I accept your surrender, Counselor. Please sit. Yethmara remained standing. I have a question before we proceed. How long have you been planning this? Torres gestured to a chair again. Planning what? The destruction of my people. This was not a response to our challenge at Kepler 442. This was a carefully designed campaign to eliminate the hegemony completely. This time, Torres spoke with quiet authority. Sit down, Counselor. We have much to discuss. Yethmara finally took a seat, his 4 eyes fixed on the human admiral. You had ships positioned throughout our territory before the first battle. Your forces knew our defensive plans, our supply routes, our communication codes. This level of preparation takes years, not months. You're correct, Torres admitted. We began studying the Sarthic hegemony the day our scouts first detected your borders. That was 4 years ago. Then you always intended to destroy us? We intended to be ready if destruction became necessary. You made it necessary when you demanded our surrender. Yethmara leaned forward, his voice bitter with defeat. We offered you a choice, submit or fight. You chose to fight. We accepted that choice and faced you in honorable battle. No, Counselor. You offered us slavery. Or death. We chose a third option. We chose to make sure you could never threaten anyone again. The Sarthic leader was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. Your species does not fight wars. You fight extinctions. We fight to win permanently. The difference between War and extinction is simple. War ends when one side surrenders. Extinction ends when one side no longer exists. And which have you chosen for my people? Admiral Torres studied the defeated alien leader. That depends on what you choose now. The Sarthic hegemony is dead. Your military is destroyed. Your government is dissolved. Your empire will never return. But your people can survive if they accept the new reality. What reality? Humanity. Now controls this sector of the galaxy. All former hegemony worlds will become human colonies or protectorates. Your people can continue to live on those worlds as citizens of human space, or they can be relocated to reservations where they can maintain their traditional culture. Yethmara's 4 hands clenched into fists. You offer us the choice between slavery and exile. I offer you the choice between integration and isolation. Your people can become part of human civilization and contribute to its growth, or they can preserve their independence in limited territories under human protection. And if we refuse both choices, Torres met his gaze steadily, then you join the other empires in Dr. Kethver's archives. The threat was delivered calmly, without anger or malice. That somehow made it more terrifying than any shouted ultimatum? Could have been, how many others have made this choice? Yethmara asked. Every species that has ever challenged humanity has eventually faced the same decision. Some choose integration. Some choose isolation. Some choose extinction. The results are always the same. Humanity continues to expand and our former enemies either adapt or disappear. Yethmara stood up slowly, his movements showing the weight of defeat and age. I will take your offer to what remains of our council, but I have one more question. Yes? When you first came to the Confederation, when your Ambassador Chun spoke of peace and friendship, did you believe those words? Admiral Torres considered the question carefully. We meant every word. Humans prefer peace when it's possible. We genuinely hope to join galactic civilization as partners and allies. We offered trade, cultural exchange, and mutual cooperation. Then, why did you prepare for war? Because hope is not a strategy. We prepared for war because history taught us that someone would eventually give us no choice but to fight. Your people provided that choice? So if we had not challenged you, then the Sarthic hegemony would still exist, and we would still be trading partners. But someone else would have eventually tested us. The Catherian Empire, perhaps, or the Void Lords. It was inevitable that some species would see humanity as a threat to be eliminated. Torres stood as well, moving to the window that showed the defeated Sarthic homeworld below. The tragedy, Counselor, is not that we were prepared for war. The tragedy is that your people made war necessary. 3 days later, the few surviving Sarthic leaders announced their decision. Rather than face extinction, they would accept integration into human space. Their people would become citizens of the new order, subject to human law and human authority, but free to live and work throughout what had once been their empire. The announcement sent shock waves throughout the Confederation. The mighty Sarthic hegemony, which had intimidated the galaxy for centuries, had not just been defeated. It had been absorbed entirely into human territory. The speed and completeness of their collapse terrified every other major power. Within weeks, diplomatic missions from dozens of species arrived at human colonies. None came to protest the destruction of the hegemony. All came to negotiate new trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. The message was clear. Every species wanted to be on humanity's side. When the next conflict began, Dr. Kethver watched these developments from his archive office with a mixture of fascination and dread. The pattern was playing out exactly as he had predicted, but faster than even he had expected. Humanity was not just replacing one empire. They were reshaping the entire political structure of the galaxy. He received a visitor 3 months after the Sarthic surrender. Ambassador Sarah Chun arrived at the archives with a small escort and a formal request to review his research. Dr. Kethver, she said as they walked through the endless shelves of dead civilizations, I understand you have been studying humanity's historical impact on galactic civilization. Indeed, Ambassador, your species has a remarkable record of success. Chun smiled at his careful choice of words. You mean destruction? I mean adaptation? Every species that has encountered humanity has been forced to change. Some adapt successfully. Others do not. They stopped at a section containing the newest entries. The Sarthic records had already been filed, joining the centuries of extinct empires. What will you write about us, Doctor? Chun asked. That depends on what humanity does next. Will you continue expanding? Will you challenge other major powers? Will you attempt to conquer the entire galaxy? Chun looked at the shelves surrounding them, each one holding the record of a civilization that had once thought itself invincible. Doctor, do you know why humans study history? To learn from the past? To avoid repeating the mistakes of others? Every empire in your collection made the same error. They believed that military strength alone was enough to guarantee permanent security. They forgot that strength without purpose becomes weakness. And what is humanity's purpose? Survival. Not just for our own species, but for civilization itself. The galaxy has spent thousands of years in cycles of war and destruction. Empires rise, empires fall, millions die, and nothing really changes. We intend to break that cycle. Kethver felt a chill of understanding. By making humanity too powerful to challenge, by making resistance pointless. Every species will eventually face the choice the Sarthic faced. Submit to human authority or cease to exist. Most will choose survival. Those who choose extinction will be accommodated. And then? And then the galaxy enters an age of permanent peace. Not because war becomes impossible, but because the cost of war becomes unthinkable. Chun moved to a display showing the current political map of the galaxy. Human territory now covered a significant portion of what had been Sarthic space, and it was growing daily as other species requested protection or partnership. Within 50 years, Chun continued, every major trade route will pass through human space. Every important resource will be under human control or protection. Every species will depend on human technology and human permission to travel between stars. A galactic empire, a galactic civilization. The difference is important. Empires rule through fear and force. Civilizations succeed through cooperation and mutual benefit. Humanity offers partnership to those who accept our leadership and extinction. To those who reject it, Kethver understood the implications. You are creating a choice that is not really a choice. We are creating stability. For the first time in galactic history, the most powerful species has no interest in conquest for its own sake. We do not want to rule the galaxy, we want to organize it. And if other species develop technology that could challenge human dominance, Chun's expression grew cold. Then they will discover why every extinct empire had one thing in common. They wanted a fight. Humanity gave them war. 6 months later, Dr. Kethver published his final report on galactic civilization. He titled it The End of History. His conclusion was simple and terrifying. Humanity had not just won a war against the Sarthic. They had solved the fundamental problem of galactic politics for 3,000 years. The galaxy had suffered through endless cycles of war and destruction as empires rose and fell. Species fought for resources, territory, and dominance. Millions died in conflicts that changed nothing except which civilization held power. Humanity had ended that cycle by making the cost of resistance greater than the cost of submission. They had not created peace through wisdom or diplomacy. They had created peace through the demonstrated ability to destroy anyone who threatened it. The galaxy entered an unprecedented era of stability. Trade flourished. Scientific research advanced. Rapidly, conflicts between species were resolved through human mediation. The Confederation evolved into a true galactic government with humanity as its undisputed leaders. But in his private moments, Dr. Kethver wondered what would happen when humanity eventually faced a challenger they could not defeat. Every apex predator in natural history had eventually encountered something stronger, faster, or more clever than themselves. When that day came, would humanity join the extinct empires in his archives? Or would they prove that some species truly were destined to inherit the stars? Only time would tell. But for now, the galaxy belonged to humanity, and everyone else was simply learning to live with that reality. The age of human dominance had begun, and it showed no signs of ending.